A warm welcome to Business Live. Coming up in this bulletin, public sector workers witness a 10% increase in base pay from January this year as minimum wage also goes up. Similar margin, we will explore implications of this development for workers in the private sector. Also in this bulletin, Bank of Ghana justifies remittance audit activities for last year as it rejects suggestions that the exercise is targeted at some individuals and institutions. Plus, oil palm producers call for government support as 2024 exports plunge by over 50%.
Huge chunk of our production coming from the outgrowers, smallholders. They lack efficiency, so their yields are around 6 tons of fruit bunches per hectare, but they can easily get to 12 tons, doubling that production.
We have details of this and more lined up for you. Please stay. Thanks so much for your time. I am Pius Kojo Baka. A look now at our stories. Public sector workers will witness a 10% increase in their base pay on their single spine salary structure from January this year. Well, this was after government met with members of the tripartite committee to also agree on a new minimum wage. There is more in the following report.
The 10% increase in the base will form the basis for reviewing the remuneration of public sector workers on the single spine salary structure. The statement from the tripartite committee showed that it will take effect from January this year to December. Government also announced a 10% increase in the national daily minimum wage, but that will take effect from March 1, 2025. Dr. Rashid Pelpo is the Minister for Labour, Jobs and Employment.
As follows. An increase in the national daily minimum wage by 10% over the 2024 national daily minimum wage, which translates into a new national daily minimum wage of 19.97 Ghana cedis. The effective date for the implementation of the 2025 minimum wage shall be 1st of March 2025.
Speaking at a meeting, President John Mahama urged the public sector workers to accept what government is offering now due to the current state of the economy.
Ghana is a crime scene, actually, because how a government can have been so reckless, I cannot understand. But we're faced with a reality, and our options are very few. We can behave like the ostrich and hide our heads in the sand and let the economy crash. But then what effect would it have on Ghanaian households and everybody? And so I've told him, I said, cut expenditure as much as you like. Even we ourselves in Office of Government Machinery cut as much of our budget as you like, because we all must make those sacrifices. A certain distrust of the political class has arisen, because it's like when everybody else is tightening their belts, the political class is loosening its belts. But I want to assure you that we're all going to tighten our belts, and there will be no wasteful expenditure. It is said that we create and share. And so let's start cooking the meal now, so that we can share when we have created. But right now, the meal is not only insufficient, the cooking pot is even leaking. And so I'll just appeal to you that let's temper our demands for this year. And once we get out of the woods, we've set good targets to bring inflation down so that the cost of everything will come down.
But for some individuals, what could be the impact of this development on the private sector going forward when it comes to reviewing conditions of service and remuneration?
Let's explore this further and engage a labor economist, Professor Boateng, for some quick perspective on this subject matter. Thanks so much, sir, for agreeing to speak to us on Business Live. First off, I want you to explain to us what this really means to the economy, first off.
Well, thank you very much. So the national daily minimum wage is determined by the National Tripartite Committee every year. And
the 10% increase
Can you hear me?
I can, please. Go ahead.
Yes, so I said the national daily minimum wage is determined by the National Tripartite Committee made up of organized labor, employers association, and government. And it is always anchored on the rate of inflation. So it serves as a guide for salary negotiation when it comes to the private sector as well as the public sector, particularly those on the single spine.
So, as a labor economist, really, of what impact will this have on the economy largely?
Well, the impact depends on where you are coming from. So, for instance, I said it is anchored on inflation. And of course, since, last year, I think we ended inflation around at 23%. It means that what was given to labor last year was not up to 23%. So they need to be restored. So if we have inflation within the 20 and then we have minimum wage increased by 10%, it means that it is an attempt to at least pushing workers against a decline in their purchasing power by inflation. Of course, for workers, I think it's going to push them a bit, but it's also going to increase the wage bill on the part of government so that when the minimum wage goes up like this, it also affects the base pay on the single spine. So the base pay will go up and it will cascade upwards across board. That means that wage bill will also go up, not necessarily by 10%. It could be more, it could be less. So on the part of the private sector, when workers are going to negotiate with their employers based on their conditions of service, this 10% increase also serves as a guide so that at least workers would know that the minimum wage has gone up, and therefore at least get something closer to that, it will also push in us. And this is meant to ensure that workers are able to, float above the minimum inflation so that their purchasing power will not decline so much.
All right, talking about the private sector, is it enough grounds, or is the private sector bound to, comply with this request if the worker so wishes?
So the minimum wage has a legal backing. What it means is that nobody, including government, no employer is supposed to pay any worker below the amount quoted this year. So if any employer is paying workers below what has been agreed upon, it's illegal. So that is one. But the point is that in Ghana, many private formal sector workers earn above them. So you will not get any worker working below the minimum wage. That one doesn't come in. But when the negotiation for upward adjustment of salaries across board, the minimum wage serves as a guide so that employers will look at it, workers will look at it. When they go to their sector, when they go to their workplace, that serves as a guide in their negotiation. Remember that the minimum wage is determined when we have inclusion of the employer, when we have organized labor as well as government. So private sector is also represented by Ghana Employers Association.
So in effect, private employers can also, work with it.
Yes, they will work with it because, as I said, the minimum wage has a legal backing. So no employer can say, I'm going to pay any worker below the minimum wage that has been fixed. So everybody is supposed to comply. The only challenge is that for the informal sector, because they are scattered, it becomes very difficult to enforce the informal sector. But since private sector is represented during the determination of the minimum wage, they are going to abide by it.
Can the economy absorb this and its impact on inflation?
I'm sure the economy, because the tripartite committee is chaired by the Minister of Employment, Labor and Job Creation. So by all means, before they accept the 10% increase, the Minister of Finance has done the math and know that the budget will be able to accommodate it. If the budget will not be able to accommodate it, I know they will negotiate. They started, and I was told that government said they could only provide 8% increase. So an increase to 10% is that government knows that crunching the numbers, they will be able to absorb.
Professor Bambuatin, thanks so much for your time here on Business Life. I truly appreciate your inputs this very moment. And I want to hear from the Employers Association. Its chief executive has joined us on the telephone lines as well, Alex Frimpong. It is. Thanks so much, sir, for joining us here on Business Life. Now, what is the role of the private sector in all of these salary reviews? Because we are learning it's not only about the public sector.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening and good evening to your listeners. Well, the Ghana Employers Association has been representing employees of Ghana in the discussion with government and labor regarding national daily minimum wage in accordance with the labor law. So we actively participate in such negotiations on behalf of Ghana.
Talk to me about your ability to pay and, of course, the concern whether the committee could have done better.
Well, we are all living witnesses to the difficulties that are facing businesses as well as employees in Ghana and our overall landlord, which is government. So after going through some 3 weeks of very difficult negotiations, we arrived at the figures that are before all of us. It has not been easy. We needed to consider the current economic challenges facing all of us, cost of living, and most importantly, how we can sustain businesses. Because at the end of the day, if businesses are not sustainable, I'm not sure all of them will survive to pay whatever wages that we have currently, let alone any increase that we anticipate.
So from the employer's perspective, what could be the implications of this review for the private sector workers? Can we use this to push further increments? Can we?
Well, honestly, we are, as a responsible member of the tripartite, we needed to give and take, hence arriving at those figures. Ordinarily, it would have been very difficult for employees to absorb even 1% given the current challenges. But of course, you don't go into negotiations with a fixed position. So after reconciling all the factors, we needed to also make room for other considerations and explanations given by the other social partners. It's difficult for businesses, but we believe that these are levels, especially on minimum wage, which businesses can cushion at this time in our history.
Now that I have you, your thoughts on the state of the economy and, of course, the business environment, how would you say we've fared so far?
Well, these are early days yet, but from the little that we know, it's a bit difficult now for businesses. And we are preparing for the National Economic Dialogue where businesses will really make our position clear regarding the economy and what we think we should do to really alleviate the difficulties that we all have. And even I don't want to preempt the discourse or the input that we want to make during the National Economic Dialogue.
And at least the 2025 budget is around the corner as well. So your expectations?
Well, we envision a budget that will help businesses overcome, one, the macroeconomic stability, ensuring that we have a macroeconomic stability. We are able to ensure that we have a stabilized forex environment. And most importantly, we want to see a budget that helps us in some key infrastructure development that will help improve businesses and open up the country for small businesses to also thrive and grow.
Alex Frimpong, thanks so much for your time this very moment. I truly appreciate it. Alex Frimpong is the Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association, speaking to us on the back of the increase in wage bill and as well as minimum wage. Now, let's shift focus to some other stories. The Bank of Ghana has justified the timing for auditing remittance activities for the last quarter of 2024. Now, it follows concerns that the action is just targeted at some personalities and institutions. Georgia Faye has the rest of the story.
The assurance from the Bank of Ghana follows rumors that the action is targeted at some politically exposed persons that have moved funds in and out of the country before and after the December general elections. There are also speculations that the action was also to expose firms that might have relaxed their rules to aid these transactions. But the Bank of Ghana is denying all these rumors, insisting this should be seen as a normal exercise, which is done every quarter of the year. The central bank has also told Joy Business that it made the announcement because it wanted greater participation and cooperation from all market players. The Bank of Ghana also insists it wants to bring some transparency since the need to publish their action that they are undertaking. Ghana last year got more than $6 billion in remittance. However, there have been concerns about whether there has been some underreporting, hence the need for this review. But the central bank again is insisting that that is not the focus of this audit.
Presidential advisor on the economy, Seth Tekpe, says government will bring back the Ghana Integrated Tax Management and Information System to ensure compliance. Speaking at Ghana's Economic Outlook, organized by the Ghanaian German Economic Association in Accra, Mr. Tekpe emphasized the need for tax rationalization to ensure efficiency.
Now, if we rationalize the tax regime, if we have difficulties, we introduce two taxes anytime we did austerity: National Fiscal Stabilization Levy or Fiscal Stabilization Levy, right? And then we had the temporary import duty. And anytime we went out of an austerity program with the fund, we removed them. So we were keeping them. Was the reason for most of the levies that we are keeping. So this summarizes the rationalization that we have to do to the fiscal regime. And until you do that rationalization and raise enough revenue, right, to contain your expenditures, you are going to borrow. And if you borrow and you do not have a mechanism for repayment, you are going to default. This is the challenge, facing our country. And my topic is on the private sector. So a fiscal regime, in essence, what I'm saying is that however you look at it, if you distort any of these taxes, if you overspend and you have fiscal deficits and whatever, as they say, the economists, you crowd out private sector. Interest rates go up, inflation goes up, deficit financing results in all those things.
You're still watching Business Live. We have more stories for you after this break. Thanks so much for staying on. President of the Oil Palm Development Association of Ghana, Samuel Avala, says the palm oil industry seriously needs government's intervention to enhance the efficiency of small-scale producers. Speaking earlier on the marketplace, he noted that production could be doubled with the right intervention and provision of equipment to boost small-scale production to reduce reliance on imports.
So yes, we need oil to come and add to what we have in the meantime. But it should not come under ETLS, waiving off duty and appearing to be cheaper. That is what the external factor looks like. But internally, we have a huge chunk of our production coming from the outgrowers, smallholders. They lack efficiency, so their yields are around 6 tons of fruit bunches per hectare, but they can easily get to 12 tons, doubling that production. The artisanal millers who use substandard machines are having oil extraction rates in the neighborhood of 12% to bunch. This can also go to be very modest, 16%. That 16% oil extraction, and that's about 30% increase in oil. And that alone will increase their oil production from the current 80,000 tons per annum by another 27 to 30,000. And if the about 100,000 hectares of the smallholder plantations that need to be replanted are also replanted, we will move from the 6 tons per hectare to 12 tons per hectare, which is double. And that alone will give us probably another 200,000 tons of palm oil. With these two major interventions, we will be self-sufficient. And a further 100,000 to be developed will make us a net importer with about another 100,000 tons of palm oil that we can export into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area opportunities.
Local maize farmers in the Afram Plains of the eastern region are struggling to prepare for the upcoming planting season due to poor sales from the previous harvest. On today's edition of Food Chain, my colleague Jesse Eramagwapo visits some farmers who are lamenting the prolonged negative impact of last year's dry spell. Here are excerpts.
Affected by the dry spell last year incurred losses of approximately 3.5 billion Ghana cedis in investment, as was revealed by the then Minister of Food and Agriculture, Brian Champong. The struggle, however, appears to have gone beyond the quantity of produce the farmers have gathered after a difficult farming season. Maize farmers are facing a new crisis as they struggle to sell their produce due to an influx of cheaper imported maize. Despite high production costs and no government subsidies, local farmers now find themselves with warehouses full of unsold maize, while buyers tend to import. Ben Kofiado is one of such farmers in Afram Plains.
Planting season, something like
beginning of the season, the rains did not fall, but we have a drought-resistant seed called Pioneer and other seeds. That drought-resistant seed is better to plant when there is a drought, but we did not have access to that seed because it was scarce and we could not find it to purchase. When the seed was eventually available, it was too late to plant it. This really affected us. From August last year, the price of maize was going up, so people began importing some because poultry farmers were struggling. Importing the maize at the time was necessary because we did not have enough in the system at the time. However, the price of the imported maize is cheaper than how much we are selling ours. We don't understand, and it's affecting us. The cost of producing maize last year was really high, and we did not have any subsidies from the government. At the moment, the small maize we are able to acquire from our farms are not being bought.
Because I don't know find a free crowd from there, say from Brazil or Italy or whatever. I then a Bruno before we drew Ghana. Na Bruno abaya fo achen ye de na ayeton ye de ne nso enema ayeto de ye adwuma ne nso ne boye den ya nse da anya subsidize bia amfa anya adwuma me gina ho subsidize one bag kramanya so ahun enti mato ade na boden na me de ye adwuma ba se sie ye ne ya me ne wo kasa ye aburo ya gu ha nyina we de se kakra bi farmers de ba ya nto na aka gudu aso a bebre de me krama buru gudem.
And you can watch the full episode on Saturday at 6 p.m. here on the Joy News channel. That's it for Business Live for today. I am Pius Kojo. We have more stories for you when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Pleasure serving you.